Hey guys, it's Bree here at Blossom and Branch Farm, and today I'm out here planting my front containers. So I wanted to show you some of the things that I use when I am planting my containers to amend my container soil. So you know that here we talk a lot about soil health, and a lot of that pertains to in-ground growing, but we also think about it when it comes to our containers, because containers need a little bit more help than our in-ground soil. So because our in-ground soil has access to all those fungi and microbes that containers don't necessarily have, we need to give them a little bit more assistance than we do our plants growing in the ground. So we often talk about this rhizophagy process and how plants eat bacteria, and the bacteria is what supplies the plants nutrients. But here in a container, the containers have a little bit more trouble keeping that soil life alive and active, especially over winter. If you're in a cold zone like I am, these containers can be subject to a lot more temperature fluctuation than our in-ground soil. For example, in the sun, these are black, they're going to warm up quite quickly, and then when it gets cold, they're going to freeze quite solid. So the temperature fluctuations are typically not great for soil microbial life. And then there's a lot of moisture changes in these containers. So from very dry to very wet, and then back to dry and back to wet, and that's typically not great for soil life. So whereas in the ground there is a more even moisture. With that in mind, there are of course a couple of things that I do. Tomorrow we'll be showing the actual differences in a couple different seed containers that we grew using wool. That's why we've actually started using wool in a lot of our containers, is because of the results we've had growing seeds using wool. So there are a couple things that I like to supplement my containers with. I'm not telling you have to do this. You could also use our alfalfa fertilizer recipe if you don't have access to wool or to wool pellets, and I'll link the video with that recipe in it here at the end of this video and below. So alfalfa fertilizer is a good nitrogen, it's a slow release, and that's a good alternative to this wool if you can't find wool. If you are able to get your hands on some wool, this is wool pellets. I've soaked it in some water so that it has broken down a little bit. You can see that now these pellets are really pretty soft and broken up. They're not quite as pelletized any longer. I just like to do this because it helps break up the pellets a little bit before I add them to my containers, but you don't have to mix them with water. You could just go right from pellet into your container. If you also have raw wool, you can use that. People have asked me, can I use alpaca wool? Definitely you can use alpaca. You could even use dog hair if your dogs haven't been treated with any kind of medications, because all that stuff gets absorbed into hair, or if they're not on, flea and tick medication, or if you don't use weird shampoos on them, because that can all be residual in the hair. So, but yes, you can try that. So why am I using wool in the containers? There are a couple reasons. One is that it's slow release nitrogen. Something containers tend to have issues with is nitrogen, again, because they're not really doing that rhizophagy process with the interaction between the soil bacteria and the plants as much as our in-ground plants are. I do like to supplement with a little bit of nitrogen for these pots. So I have potting soil in here. I reuse the same potting soil every year. My preference is Fox Farms Coco Loco. No, they're not sponsored. I just like me a good peat-free potting soil, and that happens to be one. So we've got Coco Loco in here. I reuse the same one every year. I don't dump it. Certainly, I just reuse the same one. But I am adding the wool pellets to it to help with nitrogen. So you can see these pots are pretty large, and I'm adding wool here. So this is probably about, I don't know, a couple cups worth of wool pellets, and I am just mixing this in to the top several inches of soil. So the other benefit of using wool in a container is that it's going to help with moisture retention. So wool is really good at retaining moisture. So once it gets wetted, we talked about that the soil life might be lacking here in these pots because of all the fluctuations and things over the winter. And I usually find I have good results with adding a little mycorrhizae. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Here I'm using Dr. Earth Mycos, but another one that I like to use is Bigfoot Organics. Bigfoot mycorrhizae also makes a good one. I'm just going to go ahead and toss that in here. And then I'm going to also mix that in to my soil. You could also just put it right into the planting holes if you want to make it go a little bit further. And then I'm going to pop my plants in. Now, people will often tell you need a thriller, spiller, and filler for pots, right? So some kind of spiky thing, some kind of spilling element. I don't really necessarily follow those guidelines. You are more than welcome to, but for myself, I just like to pick whatever flowers I like. And I also like to go with something that kind of complements color scheme of my house. So because I have these kind of bricks here, usually I like to choose something that is going to highlight those colors. And as you can see, we have this huge pine tree right here, and so it's pretty shaded. We only really get partial sun here in the afternoons. So I always like to think about what kind of sun exposure do I need for my containers. If you pick something that likes sun and you put it in shade, it's going to struggle, and vice versa. And then I also like to think about things that all like kind of similar moisture levels. Now I didn't necessarily follow that because I have heuchera here, which likes dry. And then I have begonias, which actually like a little bit more moist, but that's okay, they'll be fine. So the ones I've picked out here that are good with a partial shade, you can just go with whatever you like. I've got my caramel heuchera, and I love this plant. This is one of my favorite colors. Look at the leaves on this one. Heuchera does really well in a dry shade. Coleus is a similar one that has really pretty leaf colors, but I prefer heuchera in my zone. And in the fall, I'll probably move it out of the pot and into the ground because these are perennial, but they don't really perennialize in my pots because they get too cold. And then I also have this bleeding heart. And bleeding heart is native here in my zone. I always like to include something native in my containers for our pollinators. So I'm gonna pop this in. This one also enjoys shade. I have a beautiful begonia. No! My begonia broke. Look at it. Anyway, so I'll put my begonia in. And then last but not least, a sweet potato vine. I always like sweet potato vines in my containers because they kind of spill over the edge and create this really pretty spilling color effect. And again, kind of pops here in the shade. Bright colors of leaves can be nice in a shady spot. All right, let's get these in the container. All right, so I'm getting my whole dog here. I'm also gonna add a little mycorrhizae to the bottom of my planting hole. And the role of the mycorrhizal fungi is it helps our plants to create associations with the soil. It helps basically create little hyphae on our roots that help go out and bring the plants more nutrients and more moisture. So I've got that in the bottom of my planting hole. I'll go ahead and pop my plant in. And then make sure I'm filling in around all the corners, of course. And there's no air gaps. And then I'm using these nifty things I got from Sustainagrow. These are wool, little mats of wool, just straight wool, nothing added to them. Watch out because a lot of the grow bags are now advertising toppers to go with them that are made out of the same material as the grow bags. Grow bags are not fabric, they're actually plastic, and not only are they plastic, they are recycled plastic water bottles, often recycled PET plastic, and that particular plastic has a really high rate of leaching phthalates and other chemicals into soil, and especially in moist, warm environments like a warm container full of moist soil. So that's why I don't like using the plastic grow bags, even though they're called fabric grow bags. Just look into it because most of the ones that are on the market right now are made with actually plastic and not fabric, but these are wool. And this company is actually a friend of mine from New Zealand, and they are called Sustainagrow, and they're actually not selling yet in the US, but maybe if enough of us create demand, they will. You could use felt if you can find a 100% wool that doesn't have plastic added into it, or cotton or burlap. And this is just a square with a little slit cut down the middle, and I'm gonna fit it around my plant. That's gonna help keep the moisture in the soil and especially right around the roots. Also, if you have a slug problem, wool is a great deterrent for slugs. So now we've got both of our containers planted. They are well watered in, and we're just gonna keep them nice and watered. We're still not quite past last frost risk. So if we hit a frost, we will probably throw a sheet over these guys just to keep them protected. But for now, they are watered in, they are fertilized, and they are happy. And now we just wait for them to take off. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this simple video today. It's been a heck of a couple weeks here at the farm. You guys know that last week was really tough for us. So we're looking forward to spring and getting back into some normalcy here. And I hope you are all having a lovely spring as well. And we'll be seeing you guys around here soon at the farm.